This video is sponsored by Squarespace. Yeah, I realize it's random, but I wrote you a little something here about the Tesla Cybertruck. There's a whole bunch of unsold ones at the dealership there behind me. Anyway, just bear with me for a sec. There is a story told in Walter Isaacson's biography of Elon Musk from a couple of years ago that goes like this. Elon says that he was hanging out with his son Saxon. And thus spoke Saxon, "Why doesn't the future look like the future?" No idea if that story is true, by the way, but why doesn't the future look like the future is a thing that a lot of people do ask in different ways, and it's easy to understand why. Broadly speaking, the science fiction of the 20th century predicted that our time would look very different than it actually does now. By our time, they predicted that we would have houses that look like flying saucers, or hovering cars, or post-apocalyptic wastelands. Not yet. I don't think. I am in a parking lot. So the question is, why doesn't their future, our present, why doesn't it look more like what they predicted? Why does the early mid-21st century look the way that it actually turned out to look? Elon says that this question, as asked by his son, inspired the design of the Cybertruck. Something that looks like what someone in the 1980s would have predicted. Something that beloved dystopian sci-fi hero John Blade Runner would have driven. The idea behind this design has always made me laugh, because I think that Elon Musk means for this truck to look futuristic. But to me, and perhaps to you, it actually looks kind of old-fashioned. It looks like something from the 80s, because it kind of is. It's an imitation of designs from 40 years ago. It looks like the armored vehicle from Aliens, 1986. The fact that that design was intended by James Cameron to look futuristic is irrelevant. It's still a design from the 80s. So it naturally looks old-fashioned to people like you and me. And so does its present-day imitator, the Cybertruck. The reason that I'm talking about this now, by the way, is just that my son, who does not have an implicitly racist name, my son and I were talking through our feelings on the Cybertruck the other day. He thinks that they look kind of cool, but he's troubled by Elon's whole, if you crash into another car, you're gonna win shtick. My son sincerely does not wish to hurt other people. Imagine that. Anyway, Elon Musk, due to his Peter Pan syndrome, or perhaps just due to his relatively advanced age at this point, Musk doesn't seem to realize that an 80s design in our time looks the way a 50s design would have looked to someone in the 80s. Something like Tom Corbett's Space Cadet. That looks like something from the 1950s because it is, even though it believes itself to be futuristic. Believing it does not make it so. It's still clearly from the 50s, just as the Cybertruck is clearly a 21st century retro throwback to a product of 20th century imagination. Or at least that's what the Cybertruck obviously looks like to me. Let me know if you agree. I suspect at least some of you do. But I don't think that Elon Musk sees the Cybertruck as a retro throwback. I think this 80s-inspired design actually does look futuristic to him. And here is a darker potential explanation for that. I suspect that Elon and people like him, they see the 20th century sci-fi vision for our time to be a kind of unfulfilled potential. They see it as where we rightly should be by now, if not for all of the ways we've failed, or if not for those people holding us back. When Elon Musk hears his son ask, "Why doesn't the future look like the future?" his answer is predicated on the assumption that the present, our time, would not look futuristic to someone from the 80s or the 50s. And I think that it actually would. Yeah, a lot of our world would still look pretty familiar to a person time traveling from the 80s. Our cars don't hover yet. But they do look pretty different from the 80s cars. 80s cars were mostly still all straight lines and steel. Now, even a basic-ass car is plastic composite and aerodynamically curvy. I think a 2026 Toyota Corolla really would look futuristic to a frozen and unthawed 80s man, or certainly a 50s man. And holy crap, tricorders from Star Trek are real now. A smartphone can literally do almost everything that Star Trek envisioned for the personal communication devices of the 23rd century. We're actually 200 years ahead of schedule on this one. You ever been to Tokyo at night? Tokyo at night straight up looks like the vision of future Los Angeles that we see in Blade Runner. I think a person who walked out of that movie in 1982 and stepped into today's Tokyo at night would probably still think that they were still in the movie. I think a person from the 80s would be pretty amazed to hear that almost nobody has to die of HIV anymore. HIV is virtually curable in some people. It can be managed as a chronic condition in most others. There are prophylactics now that you can take to keep you from getting infected in the first place. In the 80s and 90s, HIV was a death sentence. They drilled that into our heads when we were young and sexually active in that era. HIV was the scariest thing in the world. My best friend at the time, who was more into sports than I was, he cried the night that Magic Johnson announced that he was positive in a speech that everyone took to be his Lou Gehrig moment, his goodbye. Magic Johnson is, of course, still quite alive and kicking today, and a billionaire, because now, scientifically speaking, almost nobody has to die of HIV. Which makes it all the more ironic that literally millions of people who could have been saved by these medicines are now dying because Elon Musk bought his way into the US government and chose to use his awesome power there to, of all things, eliminate funding for US foreign aid. The world's richest man decided that the world's poorest people are not worth the equivalent of spare change to keep them alive. Probably because he views them as genetic trash to be discarded, which is something he says out loud all the time now, and we let him get away with it. Even if you believe that some people really are genetically inferior, and if you further believe that you somehow possess the divining rod to reliably tell them apart, I dare you to say into the eyes of a child, "You must die, scared, alone, and in pain, so that I might realize the future that I was promised in a movie." But hey, at least the deficit's under control. What I'm arguing is that the future does look like the future. It just doesn't look quite like the future we expected. Because how could we know? Nobody can predict the future. Turns out this is it. And maybe we didn't notice because it kind of crept up on us, the way the future usually does. I'm a couple of months away from walking my older boy home from his elementary school for the last time. I could swear I just dropped him off for the first grade. The more adult answer to little Saxon's ostensible question is that real grown-up progress is hard. It requires lots of people working together for a long time toward common goals. It requires not only great ideas, but great labor to turn those ideas into reality. And this kind of real, tangible, durable progress usually unfolds incrementally enough that you might not even notice that it's happening, unless you make an effort to. Clinging to futuristic visions from the past, it's like a kind of revanchism, a lost cause mythology. I think that some people feel deprived of yesterday's future, even though they never actually had it in the first place. All they ever really had was the fantasy of it. Some people feel deprived of a U.S. economy where the uneducated, unprivileged working man could own a beautiful 3-bedroom home or maybe some farmland and support his homemaker wife and 2.5 kids on a single salary for low-skilled labor. That was always mostly a fantasy. You never lost it because you never really had it. I grew up in the 80s and 90s. And I also thought that Blade Runner and Star Trek looked really cool. Part of me is a little disappointed that the future doesn't look like that. At least, not yet. But rather than spending my time chasing a fantasy, I choose instead to put that effort toward noticing and appreciating the progress that we actually ended up making. Which is different than what I expected. But it's still really good in a lot of ways. And it could be even better if we just keep looking forward, not back. Just because something lacks the comfort of nostalgia does not mean that it is bad. Just because something or someone turns out different than what you expected does not mean they are bad. The future will still look like the future, no matter what, because we could not go back even if we wanted to. The only way available is forward. So get in, loser. We're going that way. You know something else from our present that it really is quite futuristic? Well, Squarespace, of course, the sponsor of this video. You know, when I built my first website in the 90s, I literally had to learn to code. I mean, it was HTML, but that was still kind of a heavy lift for me to do something really simple, like put my creative portfolio online for other people to see. Now, you just start with a beautiful human design template, or you tell the computer what you want, and it spits out a draft in seconds. You go in, tweak it to your heart's content, drag and drop stuff, a payment block here to take people's money, a calendar block there to let people schedule appointments with you. Really anything that most people could ever possibly need in a website is just a few clicks away. Bring your own pictures and stuff, or use their stock art, which is all integrated right into Squarespace, along with the payment processing, the newsletter tools, social integration, everything. And they host your site for you too. When you're ready to pay to make your site live, or to register a custom domain name, well, just do something good for our collective futures and save yourself 10% with my code Ragusia. Thank you, Squarespace. And thank you to everybody out there working hard to build a real grown-up future.